Welcome to the Nashville Post podcast. My name is Nicole Prano. I'm editor-in-chief of the Post, and on this show, we go inside the minds of company leaders who are reshaping our city's industries. This podcast is part of our Innovations and Ideas digital series brought to you by Cumberland Pharmaceuticals. For more stories and content like this, go to nashvillepost.com. Let's meet one of our disruptors.
Hi, I'm Chris Black, CEO and president of Thread Bank.
Thank you for being here, Chris. Appreciate it.
Yeah, very happy to. Appreciate the opportunity to talk with you guys.
Yeah, we are here to talk about innovation. And so that's the first thing I want to ask you is, what is something you're innovating today?
Yeah, it's a question. Innovation, I think comes in many different ways. People associate technology and innovation. I actually think banks, and so we obviously run a bank, a community bank that's built on a digital-first framework. Banks have been innovating really kind of since the beginning of time. And many times people don't associate innovation with banks, but that actually is what has happened over the course of decades, centuries, and beyond. So I think that's the first thing that we've kind of picked up the mantle of banking innovation, and we're just taking it to the next logical step, which is how do we deploy our banking products and services into other platforms, into partners, people who have great customer relationships today are terrific platforms. And by deploying banking products and services into that platform, we can enhance everything about their business, of their connection with their customers, the deepening of those relationships, revenue enhancement for them, does great things for us. But that's a pretty big innovation in of itself. We can talk about how you get there, which is largely through technology, but it's primarily through relationships, and I call it challenging the paradigms of the status quo. And so that's probably the most innovative thing that we've done, is just the model, is the strategy.
I'll let you kind of take a step back to broader view now and tell me a little bit about what is Thread Bank, the philosophies behind what you guys are doing, just some of the background.
Yeah, and Thread Bank came about, and the name Thread that we came up with was to embed. So we're going to thread, like into fabric, embed banking products and services into the places where our partners they may be a vertical that serves small business restaurants or attorneys or small businesses, generally speaking, I think of those as horizontal as opposed to the specific vertical type of that are specifically focused on a particular industry. So that's how we do that. We go in and we want to enhance that relationship for them. That was the kind of, from the very outset, the vision that we had when we started this was community banks do many things really well. They do relationships really well. They do credit underwriting and the banking 101 and all those things exceptionally well. That's how you get to exist and continue to grow and thrive as a community bank. What maybe they're not so good at is the deployment of technology and utilizing that technology to enhance and build those relationships and create that real stickiness, particularly as technology advances so quickly, which is, we're obviously in a massive cycle of that. And so that was, the approach from the beginning, is that we were going to take basic banking products and services built on a foundation of kind of non-negotiable tenets of banking: deposits, loans, liquidity, capital, risk management, and make those available to our partners, and really to give them that leverage and that extra lift and opportunity for an entirely different dimension to their business.
Talk a little bit, you mentioned the partnerships, especially with branches of community banks, is so important to the model of your business. So talk a little bit about those partnerships.
Yeah, we're built on partnership. That's for sure. So, as I said, one of the things that a traditional, typical bank will do is it's a relationship-first business. That relationship typically and almost exclusively is with the end deposit customer or the end borrower or the end bank customer. We had to make a decision very early on that we were willing to, enable someone else, another entity, another company, another business to, quote unquote, own that customer relationship on the behalf of the bank. So there's no doubt these are still the bank's customers. There are depositors, there are borrowers. But the people who own that relationship happen to work at another company. And that's a massive change. That's a massive flipping, kind of banking on its head. And I'd say that's probably one of the defining characteristics of how we go about the business. And so to do that, it takes a complete focus on partnership. We're going to try to provide the best technology, the best banking rails, payment rails, product capability to our partners that we can, the best enterprise risk that we can, to be the very best bank, taking care of all those banking basics, liquidity, capital, things that people don't take, they take it for granted until there's a problem. And there have been, headline problems over the last few years, as we seem to probably going all the way back to the beginning of time, again, with banking, that there are always problems. And so we focus on doing that really well and building a scaled platform of risk management, of data, of strategic advisory, of being there to be true partners for our business partners. But it takes an entirely different approach at the end of the day.
How do you go about doing that and building those partnerships to begin with? I mean, obviously, you guys have certainly grown from where you've started.
Yeah.
Thread really has taken off, I would say, in recent years. And so how do you grow that and build it?
Yeah, I mean, it's life. So there's nothing that is really new. There's nothing new under the sun. It's a biblical concept. It's something that our ancestors have observed for, again, centuries. We've observed it. I think probably everyone who has lived a few years in life knows that these things are all true. And so what's true about that is that life is all about relationships. Business is all about relationships. So when we said we were going to do this, the first thing we did was we had to put together the very best capital partners that we could, the best investors that, and when I mean best, I mean alignment with this vision, right? This vision that community banking matters. Community banking is under a lot of pressure. It's under pressure from a technology perspective, from a business model, from a delivery mechanism perspective. And so we had to have alignment there. Then we had to have alignment that we were going to seek and deploy the best technology that we could either, the best that we could find, or build, or integrate, or connect, or whatever that was going to be. And it was going to be built on this concept I'm an old military guy, so centralized control, decentralized execution. So these were kind of the tenets upon which the foundation was laid. And then it's all about relationships. And so those first couple of wins were really, like anything new, were really hard. We had to prove that we were credible, right? We had to prove that we had the resourcing, the backing. And this went for our infrastructure partners. Those people all had to make bets on us because we were small and unproven. We had great resumes and, great track records. When I look at the collective between our investors and our board members and, executive team. And so we were able to get the doors open. That was a great and remains a very fortunate thing for us with the network that we have, that doors open for us. But I tell my kids this all the time, someone else can open the door for you, but you have to walk through, and you have to keep the door open, and you have to earn your seat at that table, at that conversation. And so it's been earned, like I said, old-fashioned way, one relationship at a time. And we do things differently. We're very focused on that we're going to be great partners, and that we're going to be there through thick and thin for the partners. So choosing counterparties is really important to us.
A part of partnership is in banking specifically is with regulators.
Yeah, for sure.
We've been talking about the community banks, but also you guys have to work with regulation. Tell me a little bit about what that's been like for you guys.
Well, we entered not just eyes wide open, but embracing that was an attribute. We felt like banking in particular has a very large moat around it from a regulatory perspective for good reason. Right? When your job is to take care of other people's money, and we have a system that's built on faith and that we're all going to follow through with what we said we're going to, there has to be a strong regulatory construct to that. So we thought about what type of models could we deploy with outside the regulatory environment, and what could we do with a bank? And it was no question in our minds from the very beginning that this had to be done from a banking perspective. And we said, so if we're going to do that, what we're doing is new. It's not brand new. in many ways. There are a number of banks who've been doing this in different dimensions for a number of years, but the way that we're going to do it is fairly novel, and we have to be extremely transparent. And so again, going back to relationships, focusing on that, on transparency, on trying to have humility, put ourselves in the shoes of the regulator. It's hard many times because we don't wear the same shoes. We come at life from a different perspective. We've got a common goal, but it takes a lot of thought about how to build that cadence, to build that relationship, how to communicate, how to be transparent, but also to stick up for your business and your business model when you've got conviction, when you're executing what you said you would do. And so it's like anything else. I think we have really strong relationships with regulators from the state through the federal government, the FDIC, the Federal Reserve, and it's all been born through the hard work. There's nothing easy in banking. I know that.
How do you innovate within that regulatory framework?
It's harder, that's for sure. But I think it suits our style in many ways. I'm being an old military pilot, where people think that you're by nature a huge risk taker. Like, when I can understand the risk and calculate the risk and have full confidence that I'm equipped to deal with the risk and handle the adverse situations, then I like taking risks, especially those that other people aren't willing to take because maybe they don't have the same understanding or the same resources. So that's kind of the same approach here of how we've thought about the world of taking risk and what does this mean with both from a regulatory and just from a business standpoint.
What is it specifically that you guys are doing right now that you want to kind of dive in a little deeper on in terms of what is that greater innovation that Thread has? Well,
I think because, again, in banking, I do look at this as all a very iterative process over centuries, really, and a continued course of innovation. Back when the Stagecoach, I guess, when Wells Fargo was delivering banking through stagecoaches, it was about the bank. It was about the stagecoach. And you had to come there to the center of town and do your banking. And then branches opened up, and that was a very novel concept. And so it was all about the bank. And then ATMs came along, and you go to the bank's ATM. Then banks launch websites, and you came to the bank's website. And the natural extension of that is we say, so this is really at the beginning of what we're doing. We're taking banking to where our customers live their financial lives. So for either a consumer or small business, most of them are not interested in coming to a bank branch. I don't know how many times you've been to a bank branch. Probably not that many, I'm guessing. Yeah, very few. And that's only going to continue with as generations turn over and the habits. And these are all well understood, but the impacts are profound. And so if we focus on taking banking in the most seamless and efficient manner we can to where people do their business, that's a pretty important thing. So that was really step one. And then step two, there are a number of banks who kind of have that mentality as well, right? So we're not alone. We don't want to be alone. I think it's the novelty. One of the novelties of what we're doing is to take our single bank charter and make it efficient from a data perspective, from a risk management perspective, and from a strategic relational perspective to take that charter and where our customers can deploy multiple banking products and services with the same bank. Right now in the market, there are lots of different silos that are up. And so a given partner, one of these verticalized software companies or a brand who is very technology forward, might have a deposit product with this bank over here. They might have a lending product with this bank over here and different payment or other capabilities over here. Thread, I call it the digital banking 3.0 vision, is to run these through a single bank charter. And truly, so we treat our partners like branches of the bank, virtual third-party branches of the bank. We want them to have that mentality from a compliance perspective, from that they're feel like they're an extension of the bank. They're beholden to us, right? That we're very connected. That relationship is strong. We're beholden to giving them all the services we would give one of our physical branches, and they feel that ownership and that responsibility to, comply and to act like a bank. So in doing that, we treat them like a branch, and to be a branch in a bank and to have effective customer coverage and relations, you've got to be able to deliver more than just kind of a basic deposit product. And so that's really the concept of how this all comes together and what we've been building towards since the beginning.
That kind of starts to touch on what the future of it is. You're kind of leaning into that. So go a little further and talk about not just what you're working to create now, but kind of the broader future of community banking as a whole.
Yeah. And that's certainly one of the reasons that we did this, that we got into the business model that we're executing at Thread. Most of us have a community banking background. Some, like myself and a lot of the folks on our team, have for some portion of our careers been in community banks. Some have been in their career for 40 years. Others have been for 10, but all have developed that understanding and passion that community banks are really important. I've said this a lot of times, but community banks are generally, particularly in smaller towns, sit at the center of what happens in that community. And if they're not strong, the community weakens. Communities aren't strong, and that has societal impacts across the board. So that's always been our premise, that community banking is worthy. It's as a patriot, as a citizen, these are important things. Where community banks have really shown weakness and have been weakened in many regards, again, it's not on that relationship part. It's not on the importance of the community. It's not on trust. So that's a pretty strong foundation. If you have that, it's been on the delivery, the technology and the delivery of the banking products and services have not been able to keep up and compete with consumer expectation, which is Amazon, right? That we go on an app, we don't care how it's going to get there. It can get there by a courier to our house, by UPS or FedEx or the UPS or a pigeon or a drone, right? You just go on there and you say, here's the deal, here's how much I'm going to pay, and here's the time frame, and I want to see them drop the package and send me a picture that it's there. I think those consumers all are bank customers too, right? Mm-hmm. Somewhere. And so you can't get away from that expectation. So if the community banks who are going to survive and then thrive are going to understand that this has to happen. And I think the regulators have certainly embraced, and I think you see a lot of activity at the federal level, certainly in Tennessee. It's a terrific place to be headquartered and to really be supported. They've really leaned in and understood how important this is. So we're very fortunate to have business-minded leaders, both at the kind of elected level, but also the permanent staff level. They get this. And so that's our hope, is that through what we're doing and how we do it, embracing the community bank model, but showing the delivery needs to be different and can be different and can be done, that other banks are able, maybe not at exactly the way we're doing it or at the scale of what we're doing, but with the mentality and how we're doing it. And there are lots of different ways they could do that.
The Nashville Post podcast series is proudly sponsored by Cumberland Pharmaceuticals, Nashville's specialty biopharmaceutical company. With a focus on innovation, Cumberland is working to develop new medicines for the future. The company also sponsors and operates Nashville's Life Sciences Center, which houses Cumberland's laboratories and supports the community as a home for emerging medical ventures. Cumberland is committed to improving patient care and to strengthening the life sciences sector of Tennessee's healthcare ecosystem. Learn more at cumberlandpharma.com. We've talked a lot about the philosophy behind it and the background, but we haven't gone really technical. But I'm wondering if you can touch on kind of how you make some of your technologies work.
Sure. And again, we said from the beginning, what is it that we're going to do? What are we going to own? What are we going to build? And then what are we going to rely upon other folks? Again, not a new banking concept. The problem, again, for most banks, and particularly community banks, the technology is really expensive, and they come with long-term contracts and all these difficulties very hard to manage. And so we've gotten in this rut over the last 20, 30 years of I'm going to have one provider, and if they don't have it, I'm kind of out of luck. And that's really part of the root cause of where many banks find themselves. So we knew that we were going to have to be flexible, and we were going to have to be very modular. I think I've learned to think in the world of Venn diagrams, right? Where the perfect crossover is just a little bit of connectivity. Concentric circles are not bad, but maybe if I've got disconnected, circles, can I connect them with a little bridge, or do I have to make like an Olympic ring and put another one in there? And now AI is kind of changing a lot of that dynamic of how to think about that. But that's how we thought about it. So we knew we didn't need to go build necessarily our own technology, particularly a lot of technology that it's great, but it's a commodity, right? And commodity doesn't mean bad. It just means this is something that you have multiple alternatives in the market. And so we didn't think we would be able to add value. So we need to find great partners who build that. And we've done that. So that was really important. One thing from the beginning that we knew we had to own, and we have owned, are the data. And so we really kind of center the entire bank around the data management and us owning that and understanding that. And there are many, both offensive and defensive reasons that the bank would do that. And again, many banks are suffering mightily because, one, in most cases, they don't own their data. And secondarily, they may, even if they own it, it may be siloed in different vendors, right, who have, out of necessity or opportunity, have built their platforms on top of databases. And so now the bank's getting access to all those different pieces of data become prohibitively expensive. It becomes a huge operational issue. And so, again, if you just distill this down, like we're not all that complicated in terms of the thought process and the strategy. It's the execution and the management of these different relationships and sticking to our guns and really being almost uncompromising on things like the ownership of the data and being willing to really push and scrap for that is, that's the foundation upon which all this has been built.
You have to really internally within your company create a system for innovation to happen.
Yeah.
Which sounds a little backwards. But, you talk about decentralizing control. If I said
execution.
that right.
Centralized control, decentralized execution.
And I think that's a great framework. So I'd love for you to talk more about that.
Yeah, it's critical. Again, I think many companies, some companies are micromanaged and they're successful in spite of themselves because they've just got fantastic people. Maybe they've got fantastic leader. I found in almost every case the best pathway, the one that allows for the most room for error, the most room for experimentation, and the most buy-in is that centralized control, decentralized execution, military kind of minded model. Imagine if the military tried to do everything from a centralized execution and a centralized control, that micromanagement. I mean, it would never happen. And so that's the kind of the world that I grew up in understanding. And so it requires an alignment of authority, responsibility, and accountability that kind of have to be, if there was like a three-dimensional ball, a sphere hanging in the air, those three things would have to be in balance. And organizations get out of whack when that accountability, responsibility, and authority are misaligned. And so in order to do this the right way, you've got to constantly be communicating about expectations, standards, policies, but then you've got to hire great people and trust them to go execute and to not be afraid to make decisions, not be afraid to make mistakes with those decisions, and to really try to model the behavior that I'm expecting out of others. So I try very hard when I make mistakes, which is all the time, own it. I take it, own it. I take the fighter pilot view of it. I screwed up. Okay, we established that. Now let's talk about what happened. How do we fix it, document it, and move on, and not have the memory from a fear perspective, but have the institutional memory that we learned from that mistake. And so if you can get the entire organization to begin thinking like that, they're much more likely to be able to execute in this manner. And we have, like I said, we're very complex. It's a relationship-driven organization. Infrastructure, partners, our employees. And if people don't feel that empowerment, if they don't feel that ability to, make decisions, and that when they make the wrong one, they're not going to be hung out to dry, right? So I think that's really again just core principles of how we try to operate. And it's been a learning process. We've had to early on when we took over the bank, which was in the process, a small little bank, which is in East Tennessee, that was kind of out of capital and not in a good position. There were about 25 employees. Today we're many multiples of that, I'll just say. And early on, I think I had to be on almost every call. It felt like micromanagement, but the intention was always to hire the very best people that possibly can, who are great leaders, who are great communicators, and then set the vision and give people space to spread their wings.
The reason I bring that back up is because in the last answer previously, you mentioned AI. And so I want to hear from you about how you've been able to integrate AI and trust your workforce to implement with a tool that's so new.
Yeah. It candidly, it happened a little bit by happenstance. It wasn't really my plan. Obviously was very aware of what was happening. I don't know that I really believed all the hype. And that may have been warranted last year. Not if you're a developer or a coder or someone who's really building technology, but from a user standpoint, I don't think the models were there. Whenever I would mess around with it, there would be lots of hallucinations. And so I just kind of discarded it. Like, it's hype. It's not ready for prime time. Then something happened very early in the year where I said, I don't have enough time, and I don't have the capacity to take in all this information and really decipher what's happening. I wonder, I'm going to give AI a shot here to do it. And that weekend, I barely slept. I was up all weekend and said, okay, this is now real, and kind of ripped through almost every level of the bank, asking questions about how are we doing things relative to our strategy, coming up with ideas, questions, right, that I would just use to accelerate what my job was, and to get to things that I hadn't been able to get to before because of either lack of time, lack of bandwidth, energy, focus, because these things are hard and complex in growing organizations. And the biggest takeaway from that was it is almost solely built the effectiveness of artificial intelligence upon the inputs and the person who has expertise, who's driving that. And something I know Joe Maxwell, who's my partner, Thread chairman. He had been kind of pushing for a while. Hey, when are you going to get a little more into this? And he was talking about meta prompters, and that he's, if you know Joe, he's the best meta prompter out there. And I get that. And I completely agree. And so that's what I've challenged. We call them our SMEs, our subject matter experts. You all in your areas should be the absolute best prompters that there possibly are, and agent builders, and helping our development teams and the technical process folks. They'll figure out the process of how to do this, but you need to be the product mindset and the product developer and the expertise and what the requirements are and how we execute these things. And I think it's exponentiated our capacity and capabilities, in under a year or under half of a year time frame. So it's very exciting. I think as it relates to people, and there's a big debate going on, the stock market every day I think is schizophrenic. Is SaaS going away? No, we're going to need more SaaS, right? What's happening here? What's going on? Nobody knows. All I know is the same thing. Humans aren't going to change. The course of human history is one of innovation and adaptation. And for those who put in the work, have integrity, and surround themselves with good people, there are always going to be tremendous opportunities for them. And so that's the same with artificial intelligence. I fully believe that. I don't know what it's going to do to unemployment. Nobody knows. And anybody who says they know, they don't know. Even the greatest economists out there, they don't know. But what I do know is and this is something that because I've seen it, I've already seen it, and then we try to tell people it's both a challenge and a reassuring message. Is AI is not coming for your job. People who use AI are coming for your job, and my job, your job, like I think everybody's job.
Yeah.
And so that doesn't mean you turn your brain over. Quite the contrary. It means it's going to amplify and accentuate who you are if you lean in and you figure out. So I would recommend everybody, no matter your station in life, begin to get trained, be curious and train yourself and find resources. They're everywhere of what it actually is and how you can use it. And it doesn't use nearly as much water as growing almonds either. So that's another kind of urban legend that people think that it's all these bad things. It has definite, like anything that has power, it can be used for really bad things, obviously. And so any of those things are possible. But I think we haven't built progress in humanity and the type of what we've done in our country by ever thinking like that, right? Mm-hmm. It's always about how can we capitalize on this? How can we advance things forward? And we're going to risk manage the bad parts.
Yeah, that kind of touches on my last point really well, because you started talking about kind of the human experience around AI, and I want to know from you, how has AI changed your personal life, or just outside of your career and the tech that you work with within that? Mm-hmm. How has it affected you?
It's an interesting question. Off the cuff, I'd say it's probably made me more confident to be vulnerable, strangely. When you get to my old age or increasing age, whatever it is, the stage of life I am now, and especially when you get titles and you get some status and people look to you and they ascribe, well, that person should know X, Y, and Z. Mm. And so that becomes very hard sometimes to find trusted resources. People, that's why mentors are so important, and having people that you can go through these things with and who are of like mind or at least like experience. And that becomes a challenge. And so I've found, both in business and I've moved it into personal, wow, this is a place where you can go and you can be more vulnerable. You can ask stupid questions, dumb questions that other people might say, I can't believe this guy is asking that question of me. And now, I don't believe any of that's actually true, right? Like, I think that everyone kind of lives like that, and it's all a bit of a facade, but it just makes it easier. And you can kind of clip through the basics, the rudimentary things that maybe you didn't know and you should have known, and build that knowledge base. And so that's what it has done for me, is it's a democratization of expertise in a lot of ways. And you can apply that to home. You're doing housing renovation. I mean, I do it to our attorneys. I do it to, my mom, she's had some health troubles over the last year. And so this was actually the first time I guess I really used it. She was in the hospital in Ohio, where I'm from, last summer about this time. And things were not in a good spot for her. It was very challenging. So I was up there a lot. My wife was up there with me. And we kind of had her team of doctors, and the cardiologist was in the room. And I had prepared because I was feeling like I was getting conflicting information from different doctors, because they weren't spending enough time together. They're busy, right? Those guys run around. And no one had kind of held them accountable. And so I called a bit of a board meeting for all my mom's doctors and said, hey, what's going on here? And I had educated myself with Grok. Had spent the night before asking a ton of questions. And I was really focused because it's my mom, right? Yeah. And I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I'm not dumb. I can remember things, especially when I'm focused on it, right? Sure. And after about 5 minutes, my wife was like, wow, are you going to stop? Like, because I was all over the cardiologist in a loving way. And and he said, well, and he meant it seriously. He's like, where did you go to medical school? I was like, buddy, I didn't go to medical school. I said, my mom's in the hospital bed, and I'm not getting good information out of you guys, so I had to educate myself. And I held up my phone. I said, Grok. And he was like, You're kidding me. I said, I'm not kidding you. I said, I know there's danger in it, right? Like, I'm not trying to be the doctor, but I was able to get enough insight and ask those questions that, like, those doctors don't have time.
It helped you communicate with them.
Exactly. To
like
get on a
their
level. Yeah, to get to a level where we could cut through all the basic, like, tell me what a red blood cell is, right? Like, get past that. I wasn't trying to be a doctor. I wasn't trying to act like I'd been to medical school, but it allowed us to cut through the 20 minutes that would have been spent on all the base things of him just educating me about what was going on. So I knew enough to know, here are the various options and here are kind of the triggers. And I could ask much more targeted questions that had a tie-in to the other type of doctor who I was talking to, the surgeon or whomever. And I probably should have had a clue once I went through that a year ago that was a thing. But I probably tuned it out because I was more focused on other things.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. No, I think that democratization of knowledge is really interesting for sure about how AI is impacting everybody on a day-to-day basis. And that's why, kind of that's why we're doing these, really, because clearly it's something that's it's around to stay in some capacity.
Yeah.
I was talking to another guest earlier who mentioned, well, there's a piece of it that's probably a bubble, which is, I'm sure, probably in banking, you feel that way too, because you see that kind of trend all the time.
Yep.
But just want to close out and say thank you for being here and ask if there's anything else that you want to kind of add. I always like to try to ask when I can, what am I missing? What is the thread or the through line? The thread, that's funny. About
we do that all the time.
about innovation with finance or AI or whatever. What am I not asking you that you think is important?
I don't know. You've asked a lot of good questions.
Good.
Yeah. No, I think I don't think anything major to add. I think there's, like with most things, a bubble, whatever it is. It's so easy to be pessimistic, and by nature, I would say I'm like a cautious optimist, but I will focus very intently on the negative. Because I want to solve it. Like I want to define it, put it in a box. Like I said before about the risk taking. So people think, oh, he's kind of a negative guy. Not at all. I just want to solve that. I want to understand what it is. Yeah. Because the flip side of it is just where humans are in our nature and how we're built. That it's all about continuing to advance the ball. Try to make it better for the next person than you found it. Make it better for your kids, for your neighbor, right? All these concepts. And so there's a lot going on out there. And I think the message is focus on the positive things, right? Try to contain and define and mitigate the bad things. Focus on those positive things, whether it's technology or your business or your family, whatever. And that's where kind of the source of all the good things come from.
That's awesome. Thank you so much, Chris. I appreciate your time.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for listening to the Nashville Post podcast. Be sure to follow on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows. And please help spread the word by sharing, rating, and reviewing the show. The Innovations and Ideas digital series is brought to you by the Nashville Post with support from Cumberland Pharmaceuticals. For more content like this, go to nashvillepost.com and follow us on LinkedIn or wherever you get your news. This episode was produced in partnership with Relationary Marketing and the Nashville Entrepreneur Center. Produced and engineered by Buckner, Chuck Bryant, AJ Meyers, Kammer and Amira McCall.